Welcome back to Emerging Valley, which is going to be a real highlight for the Africa 2020 season. Emerging Valley has been labeled as part of the Africa 2020 season, and we have Miss Ngone Fall, who is here with us today in this plenary session. She's going to be talking about the creative and cultural industries in Europe and Africa. We also have two high-level people who are here with us for this opening session of the Africa 2020 season. Jérôme Pasquier, who is the French ambassador in Nigeria, who's going to tell us about his vision on the relationship between France and Africa through Nigeria. And finally, we have, and it's a real honor, a real privilege to have with us here today Miss Angélique Kidjou, who is a godmother of the Africa 2020 season. She is a great artist, and she made a very good keynote session speech last year. We're going to now start this highlight of the Emerging Valley session, all about creative and cultural industries in Africa and how are these industries bouncing back from COVID with regards to the economy and the economic sessions as part of the Africa 2020 season. How are the CCIs continuing to resist against COVID? And I'd like to congratulate Ngone Fall for being here and for participating in this session with us today. First of all, the dimension of cultural industries is not a new thing in France. This is very much present in other countries as well, and it's a very important part of cultural exchange. Cultural diplomacy is not all about economy, it's also about discussions and sharing cultures abroad. This must be adapted, of course, with regard to developments. We are looking at new forms of creativity with the youth, with digital technologies, and biodiversity. And this is particularly relevant for Africa and Nigeria even more so. Nigeria is a real force in Africa, not just in Africa, but also due to the fact that Nigerian artists are known around the world and they are very well represented in new technologies as well. They are the leaders and the carriers of cultural industries. I'm sure you'll be able to remember the speech that was made in Ouagadougou that was done to the youth in Nigeria, which has a very young population in general. Traditionally speaking, we have friends in older generations, and then it's important that we keep these cultural links with the younger generations, especially in Africa and including English-speaking Africa. we do not have the same story with them, of course. Is that a good thing necessarily to have not had the same ambiguous past? But in any case, for Nigeria, it is a major issue, a major challenge to develop cultural and creative industries. So Ngone Fal, as part of the Africa 2020 season, has set up an incredible initiative and faced down COVID-19. It was very interesting to see that at the beginning of this season, it was so useful to actually present a new image of Africa thanks to its youth that the president of France thinks is very important. I would say that yes, for French culture, this is absolutely true. People in Nigeria are very much aware of the fact that they are surrounded by English-speaking countries. There is also an interest for French culture as well. We need to adapt to the expectations of CCIs. You've already heard people saying that over the past few years, things are developing in France and in Nigeria very much, and Nigeria is actually becoming a benchmark place in terms of CCIs. Abuja is one of the biggest cities across the entire African continent. We've already mentioned CCIs in terms of music, and more recently we have had the Grammy Awards, which have had several Nigerian winners. I think that these artists are particularly well known in Africa and across the world. In cinema, we have launched programs and training courses for scene writers. This is a program that was launched very recently, and it has enabled us to develop projects for the cinema in Nigeria. I would also like to mention not just the cinema, but literature as well. We have Nigerian authors, both men and women, who are particularly talented and are more and more well known in France. We have many different Nigerian books that have been translated into French and are available on the market in France. And this shows at what point the creative and cultural industries in Nigeria are reaching overseas. As Nigeria has many things to teach us, absolutely. There are always things to learn in discussions. Nigeria is going through a new dynamic angle at the moment. The fact that we have four particularly important characters in Nigeria at the moment, two of which are women, has actually helped bring Nigeria to the world stage with regards to CCIs. I think that especially female Nigerians have a big role to play in helping tackle many challenges that Nigeria faces. I think that these personalities have been talked about during the Emerging Valley Conference. We have men who are involved as well. And this has opened us up to all of the possibilities for the programs and the means that are available in the countries that have been selected. We have various different ministers that work on international development for CCIs. We also have the wide range of CCIs that have come from Nigeria that are people in France are taking more and more interest in. And I think that this will enable the level of exchange and cooperation to continue to improve in the future. We'll be able to gain many things from the high level of cooperation between France and Nigeria and continue to do so into the coming years. Digital digital technology is a very important part of the Africa 20 season. We would have very much liked to be there with you in person, but we're not able to. Fortunately, digital technology has allowed us to participate in the conference nonetheless. As a godmother of the Africa 2020 season, I would say that for me, the memory I have that impacted me the most was the press conference that we did. For the first time, I saw with my own eyes how innovation for characters and superheroes in young people in Africa who were using gods and goddesses from their culture to talk about their own cultures, which was simply not possible even 10 or 20 years ago. That is what the Africa 2020 season brings. It's important to talk about digital technology and the amount of talent that there is available for young entrepreneurs to make use of it, those that are in Africa more specifically than in other places, which is why it makes me so proud to be a godmother of the Africa 2020 season. Thanks to all of this, I've been able to understand more about myself, I've been able to understand my own background, and in Marseille, I've met people who are able to do the same thing, actually tell me about their own stories. And that's what digital technology helps us do these days. It helps us to travel in a broader sense of the term, not just simply physical travel, but also to travel and hear about other cultures in Europe and Africa and abroad as elsewhere as well. Because transmitting the ideas of culture normally is done by speaking about it, and digital technology enables us to do that much more efficiently. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I'm not there with you in person, but I'm there with you by heart. COVID-19 impacted every social class in Africa, but the resilience that Africans have has enabled them to not let COVID stop them from talking and stop them from doing business. Someone I know has been manufacturing soap and has continued to do so and has been talking about their business to everyone they know. They've been able to continue with their own initiatives. They even went on the radio and spoke about their project. They went and also talked about COVID-19, which was listened to by people in villages who might not have understood it otherwise, or even or even had access to this kind of awareness otherwise. I have been singing a song which has also served to help people gain awareness of COVID. Let us try at this moment to listen to this song, and we will get out of this pandemic even stronger than we were before. It was what I find is actually very touching is to see the amount of people who have sent me their video in just 48 hours after they listened to my song. 8 million people in 48 hours listened to this song, and I even had Japanese people saying that they'd listened to my song. As COVID has impacted both Europe and Africa, fortunately, we've had people who have stood up and done what they can to help combat against it. My Africa of tomorrow, for me, is based in music. I have seen how music impacts the continent, and there are so many artists that are both artists and entrepreneurs. They have started a career in Ghana or Zambia or Africa or Nigeria or South Africa, and they've been able to do so thanks to digital technology. Digital technology has had a great impact on music across the entire world. We have people like Burna Boy, Mr. Easy, Sampa the Great, so many different musicians today that are unmissable thanks to digital technology.
Good afternoon or good evening. We are now here close to the end of our first day. We've had a very dense day. We've talked about financing, biodiversity, digital technologies between Africa and Europe, and now we're going to be looking at the Africa 2020 season. So thank you very much for Angelique Kidjo's keynote speech with this amazing message of hope, and also the French ambassador in Nigeria's message as well. We're now here in a session about perspectives about Africa of the future. We have General Commissioner of the Africa 2020 season, Ngoni. We have François Catala, co-founder of La Fac. Hello, François. We have Delphine Wibo, who is head of international affairs at the French National Audiovisual Institute. Hello, Delphine. As you know, Emerging Valley has a label about Africa and innovation, and for me this is the season of resilience, and Nguni, you're going to be talking more about this in detail. We're lucky to have Tijen with us as well, general partner of Partech Africa, who is going to be answering our questions and will be coming to join us in the panel later on. This Africa 2020 season symbolizes the strength of the cultural and creative industry with regard to COVID, but also with regard to this message of resilience. Despite the pandemic, despite obstacles, the African continent can continue to shine across the world through digital and also through the creative and cultural industries. in some ways, social distancing doesn't exist anymore. Closing borders is not really there. We can't see each other in person. I would have loved to have had you here in person for this fourth edition. But however, we're here, we're talking, we're discussing. And this is also the strength of digital technologies. And the Africa 2020 season exists and it is thriving thanks to digital technologies. And Ngone, you are stronger than COVID-19. So I'm going to start with you, Ngone. We met in 2019. You were on stage at the camp. And you were announcing the launch of this season. This was in 2019. You were presenting the main strategies. We're in the middle of the pandemic, but we're at the middle of the Africa 2020 season. How did you successfully manage this? Using digital technologies to this extent in order to bring this huge project forward with over 100 initiatives, which is a reality here now today at Emerging Valley. You use digital as a lever for this. Could you please tell us about your experience? Hello, thank you very much, Samir. I didn't do this on my own. We did this together. All of our partners were involved. We have around 883 partners in France and over 200 in the African continent. It exists thanks to the mobilization of the operator, the French Institute, particularly the Paul de Cézanne Institute, and all of the colleagues that supported us in this project. This season exists because you had projects and you wanted it to exist, and it's together that we're going to bring this forward. We're going step by step, and it's together that we're going to be facing all of the difficulties and facing up to COVID, which is not going to win. As you know, with regard to digital technologies, you know this continent perhaps better than I do. We're going to list the number of countries that we've visited and the number of months and weeks that we've spent in them to see who wins that prize, Samir. But digital is already a reality on the continent because travel is very difficult. One of the questions this season, there are 23 questions, and one of them is the circulation of people, ideas and goods. And you know that going from one region to another in the continent is a challenge. It's an economic challenge. It's a waste of time sometimes. And it's absurd. Sometimes I'm in Dakar trying to go to Uganda. It's easier to go to Lisbon and then come back again. It's quicker and it's cheaper. So we have taken ownership of digital tools, telecoms ambitions as well, true digital projects, not just Facebook Live, but having a digital project from the start, extending networks, meeting other people, not just in the continent, but across all four corners of the world. Operators, artists, and scientists on the continent have been doing this since internet was first in existence. It's a state of mind. And I've been trying to communicate that through this season. Mobilizing a continent is a mindset. It's about knowing how to work. And we've transposed that into France to try and meet operators there and to think together about the world of tomorrow. This was before COVID. Our first meeting was in November 2018. And even in 2019, when I was in Emerging Valley, we had no idea what was going to happen. But we've seen other disasters in Africa. We're used to this. We're not defeatist. We're pragmatic. We're agile. And we know how to stay ahead of the curve because we've had to deal with a lot of challenges. Yes, this lesson of resilience is really embodied in this season. What are the main messages that have been communicated despite it all? How has this season been supported by public, and how are you going to continue collaboration after this Africa 2020 season? How is the ecosystem going to continue to grow and densify and increase after and throughout 2021? My idea from the offset was to mobilize a continent and to create networks, my networks of networks, And that way we can get an entire continent involved in this adventure. This is a human adventure for encounters and mobility. COVID is preventing us from that now, but from the offset, the aim was to think together about the world of tomorrow, the world that we're starting to build today, and to have a Pan-African season carried by civil society exclusively, and to think about the challenges that this continent has been encountering for decades or centuries. How can we solve this problem of access to water, electricity, health systems, distribution of knowledge, citizenship, economic emancipation, energy issues? How can people on the continents, individuals and structures, have innovative solutions? This is a season based on innovation, carried and led by civil society, who I consider to be the true agents of change. They're disrupting ecosystems, creating new ecosystems, multiplying solutions in order to inspire the rest of the world. This is not a continent isolated from the rest of the world. That was never the case. We've always been considered as the cradle of humanity. Everything started in Africa. Thank you very much, Ngoni, to carry on now with this explosive growth of culture in Africa. I'm going to speak to a big investor. This is the general partner of Partech Africa, Tijan Deme, who's going to give an investor's point of view, working with startups in the sector. This sector's already exploding, and it could be a real game changer and become a very powerful industry on a global level. And tomorrow we will be having a debate with Microsoft, with GAFA. This could be a counterpower that is going to disrupt other digital powers across the world. So we're now going to welcome Tijan Dem, who will answer our questions, and then we'll come back to the stage. So he's going to set some framework before we continue the debate with our other members. Thank you very much for having me here today, and thank you for this question, because the entertainment sector is, for us, one of the sectors that we were somewhat disappointed in recent years in the continent. We know that there is a lot to do. We're convinced of that in terms of cultural creation and diffusion of that online, but we have not seen investment coming into this sector. What happened this year, despite the difficult environment, has been very positive. So what's happening and why? Essentially, there are two different categories in the entertainment sector. There are startups that do distribution of content distribution on digital platforms, whether it's through subscription services or other business models that distribute content to a public that is asking for an increasing amount of African content. So it's very urban content for children and parents. And these platforms, because I'm going to give you some ideas to try and help you understand this, but because they offer Super Sema, for instance, which was launched recently, there's a heroine for a 5-year-old heroine that helps children in an educational entertainment approach that really speaks into this middle class African culture, or perhaps because they share much more prosaic content. These platforms are very successful in terms of numbers. They're starting to raise funds and developing. And on the other side, there are studios. What I would characterize as a studio is a structure that has content production, that distributes that at a global level on other platforms, whether it's Apple, Google, YouTube, etc. And the value is essentially in the content creation. And these studios now are trying to get experience, culture, reference, folklore, all this material from Africa, and to export that through the form of gaming, for instance, which we've seen elsewhere. And in these studios, there are some investments now, but there's not much success yet. But this is a business where we need to expect hit business success stories. You need 100 studios in order to find one global success, where we can start to see things where we know that success is just around the corner. Fundraising in entertainment is still limited to a very few countries. Nigeria is one of the biggest content producing countries in Africa, so naturally investors invest there. But unlike what happens for many years, this year, for the first time, we saw businesses outside of Nigeria raising significant funds for content production. Thank you very much. We are now going to come back to our discussion with Tijana, but I'm going to hand over to our guests now so that they can react to this vision from the investor. So I'm going to hand over to Leslie Donald Williams.
So Leslie, I hope you hear me, that you are heading one of the very first tech hub in Africa dedicated to digital creation in South Africa. Can you explain to us the transformation of this sector across the continent, and what have been the key steps, and what is the potential of the creative industries in terms of job creation, especially for the youth in South Africa?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a very exciting time for the sector of tech hubs across Africa. If I look at some of the pioneering hubs around the period of 2008, 2010, it was initially iHub in Nairobi, and then CC Hub came along. There's also some hubs like our labs, that was this really small community hub in Cape Town, and now they have presence on 5 continents in 23 countries. So I think we are at that point now where we are serious players. A lot of the initial founders, we were all individual founders, so even when I set up Impact Hub in 2010, it was individual entrepreneurs financing it. And now we're starting to see more serious players come in. We're seeing far more even corporate tech hubs. We're seeing, like Smolokong is the largest university-based hub in Africa. So it's far more mainstream now than the early days. There was a report released towards the end of 2019, 648 tech hubs in Africa. So that is quite large. There's cities like Nairobi, Lagos, Cape Town, Johannesburg have over 40 tech hubs. And I think we are at that point now where we're starting to define what the business models are, and supporting entrepreneurs in a stronger way. I'm happy to say that there's a lot of collaboration across the continent between hubs. And you'll see the ones that are quite strong, and there's maybe I would say about 5 to 10 that really stand out in terms of the over 600. And we're at that point now where we're starting to differentiate, which are the and coming ones to make the sector strong, because you need that growth spurt in any emerging sector. It's growing, but the strong ones are really the ones that are surviving, especially if you look at the time of COVID now. And they are collaborating. So I think for me, what I find exciting is that venture capital is starting to flow in the continent and starting to you know, create more opportunities for entrepreneur ventures to grow because they need that strong financial support. I'm excited that the entrepreneurs we are seeing are solving real world problems that are relevant to the Africa context. They understand the local issues. We're seeing development in hubs. Now, when I spoke at the World Incubation, the Entrepreneurship World Incubation Summit in Qatar, just before lockdown, I was quite unique in our way of doing things in Johannesburg, where we're linking strong skills development to entrepreneurship development. But I see this trend is starting to grow around the world in developing economies, tech hubs, because tech startups cannot grow if they don't have the talent to grow those teams. And that is the importance of us blending skills. I think the last two things I'll say is that because of all of this vibrancy, some of the personnel have been coming to Africa and investing in the space of, your Mark Zuckerbergs from Facebook. We're seeing Stripe, African technology company Flutterwave, they were valued at $1 billion earlier this month after, getting another $170 million investment. And they have strong investment and interest in furthering further startups. My final point is that we're seeing more specialization of hubs. It's not just tech hubs. In fact, we're seeing hubs for journalists, digital hubs for journalists. We're seeing media hubs. And I think for me, those are really where the growth opportunities come. But it's also employment opportunities for younger people who aren't necessarily in formal university institutions to grow their skills.
New digital partners are starting to draw on digital partners to see this perspective. So Delphine Wibo, you are a partner of Leslie. You've signed a partnership here. Could you tell us what this partnership is about and what the mutual interest was for you? Also, locally, how did you sign this partnership between a big French corporation?
Luna has been on the scene since it was set up and been able to constitute a large range of know-how, especially with regard to content. We claim to be a media asset for producers, creators, and distributors. Audiovisual should be for every kind of public audience, and it creates a lot of jobs as well. In 2019, we signed a partnership with Chimologong. This partnership was all about a partnership that pre-existed it in Africa, in South Africa, and we had been supporting the partner since 2013 with its archiving processes. So this partnership with Chimologong really helped us continue our partnership with South African institutes. It helped us work on the national archives and to inspire the fact that these archives need to be enhanced with new innovative projects, especially by using digital technology, artificial intelligence, and immersive technologies. So, for us, it's a very important partnership that has many advantages, among which I could say that we're able to benefit from the dynamism and the creativity of professionals in the sector in South Africa, particularly thanks to Tsimologong. And the nature of the projects that we're implementing with South Africa helps us call on a wide range of expertise and professionals, both to transfer over expertise and know-how, but also going both ways. It helps Lina enrich its practices and benefit from all the things that our South African partners can help us implement. This partnership is aimed at being a long-term partnership, as I mentioned, with regards to the National Archives project in South Africa that we're working on with Tsimologon. And in 2020, we launched a big project with the Robben Island Museum in Cape Town that will be supported by the French Development Agency as part of its CCI program to preserve and to give access to the assets of the Robben Island. This partnership has been implemented to try and help everyone in the network to benefit from the Robben Island partnership. So thank you very much. I can see that this is a kind of new type of digital diplomacy between the ecosystems. I'm going to ask François Catala, who is the co-founder of LATAC, to tell us about the projects that he has implemented in Africa for CCIs. Why did you choose Africa specifically? And recently, something you have done that you'll tell us about is that you have implemented a partnership with a Nigerian startup that will be able to benefit from your expertise and your platform to propose its content. Francois, could you please tell us more about it? Thank you very much, Samir, and hello, everyone. So I'd just like to fill in something that you said. Our activity is much more about proposing training programs. And to do so, we have partnerships with European stakeholders as well as African stakeholders, specifically even more so with sub-Saharan African partnerships. At the university at La Fac for the last 4 years, we have been working on how can we improve the potential training courses for CCIs to young people in Africa and to contribute to structuring value chains and contributing to helping growth that Didier mentioned earlier on. How can we contribute to growing the expertise and know-how of professionals in the continent for audiovisual, cinema, radio, as well as music? We also work with video games that need structuring and training. Our desire when we set out was to quickly address the African continent, and specifically for the sub-Saharan English-speaking African countries. We wanted to build networks. We were very pragmatic in our approach. We saw that this is the region which had the biggest demand. And so we took that into account and we implemented it into our strategies because we wanted to continue having a positive impact on the CCIs in this region and help young people gain access to expertise and eventually a job. We saw that at that point, this sector wasn't necessarily using digital technologies very well, which was in a stark contrast to the very large demand of young people in sub-Saharan Africa for the content that they were wishing to access. So I saw that there was a huge gap. And in Africa, this is very powerful. It's very clear that Africa has great needs for digital technology and e-learning. Not just e-learning though, also face-to-face and in-person teaching and learning. There is a mobile networks which are continuing to grow and develop to enable people to communicate with each other more easily. The African youth is very agile and very savvy for digital technology. They know how to use smartphones very well, almost as well as the people in Europe know how to use them. The 40 training centers that we have want to try to answer the needs of the sub-Saharan region that we are aiming at the most. My associate and I, who is also the co-founder of La Fac, has a very long experience in sub-Saharan Africa, and we were very much convinced about the fact that the culture is a real vector for future job growth potential. What I mean by that is that when we create a job, we help structure sectors, cultural sectors, and we continue to help support the growth of CCIs. This has a positive social impact as well. This is part of inclusion as well. It's a resource which you can continue working on in the future, and once we have managed to create one job, it can have a snowball effect and continue growing and proposing and creating other jobs as well. So that's really what our ambition is all about. We want to put culture back into the heart of societies that we're working. That's why we have developed the products that we have. And our service is basically about proposing training sessions for people who want to get involved in CCIs. We have developed a mobile app. We have virtual classes, online lessons, as well as in-person lessons. We have seminars which are quite intense, and all of the training course content has been put together with our partners in France and partners in Africa as well. That's an important element of this. They've helped us to identify the needs and what sectors that we need to be focusing on. Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you for your explanation. We're going to now talk about Uganda with Tijane Jeme. Partech Africa is very much in the DNA of CCIs. Could you please tell us a bit more about the support program that is dedicated to CCIs? This is supported by the FDA, and how has your company, Elijah, been able to integrate this program? Elijah.
Okay, sorry. So Elijah, so you are running a startup that is specializing in industrial creative industries. What are the activities and what is the value proposition of your startup Feza? And you have been in a program named Africa2020. Can you tell us a few words about this program and what kind of partnership have you been able to create with the Africa2020 acceleration program?
Okay, perfect. I get you. So I'll start by telling you about Feza. Feza is a tech and entertainment company that operates in Uganda in East Africa. We build tools and services for live musicians across their entire live music process. So specifically, we have a booking platform that allows bookers from around the world, so festivals, businesses, individuals from around the world to find great talent from Uganda and book them online to perform at their festivals or events. We then have a live production platform where musicians, once booked, can easily source for everything they need to sound good and look good as they deliver. So they can find stages, lighting, backline, PA, and the entire span of what they need to execute a live music production. So that's a gear marketplace. And then lastly, we have a content delivery platform, which is pay-per-view, which allows musicians to then reach a wider audience to monetize their performances across the world. So what this allows us to do is to reduce the cost of doing business for live musicians, but also to open up access to a global market, so a global market for local musicians to reach and monetize their art. And this was quite handy, especially last year during COVID, seeing that gatherings were on lockdown, and the only available opportunity for a lot of live musicians was to perform through online platforms such as ours. A lot of the platforms available on the internet happen to be, free, so they don't have monetization capability built in. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and the difference with us was that we're able to allow the musician to monetize an online concert and reach fans from around the world, even when they could not be in the same venue together, they could not travel. And we did upwards of 30 concerts last year during lockdown, funny enough, which is the highest number of concerts that we've done in 1 year, with quite healthy payouts for each of the musicians that participated. Once we did this, we got the attention of a few organizations. Music in Africa Foundation, that is based in South Africa, picked us up. They came to partner with us and enabled us to do even more shows. They were very excited about the opportunity that the pay-per-view platform specifically presented during COVID, the opportunity for musicians to continue to earn and to engage their fans and monetize what they did. And they funded another 10 shows on top of what we had already done, and it attracted quite a bit of attention. As you mentioned, we're part of Africa2020, a program that is funded by the French Development Agency and run by a consortium of 4 different companies, led by a company in Belgium called Africalia. So Africalia put out a call late in 2019, seeking for innovative companies in the creative space, based in 4 countries, so Uganda, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Morocco. And we applied, we responded to that call, and we went through a series of interviews, and we came out as one of the people that were chosen. 9 companies were selected, and Feza was one of them. And what that program facilitated for us, as you mentioned, is an acceleration program. It comes with financing, about 130,000 euro. It comes with close mentorship on 2 levels. So there is business mentorship on scaling your business, thinking about term sheets for raising money, thinking about product market fit if you're not yet there, but also creative mentorship. So linking you up to people that can open up more markets for the artists that you represent. We currently work with about 134 musicians in our country.
Thank you.
So the program is called Financing and Acceleration.
Thank you, Elijah. It's very important because you mentioned how you dealt with the COVID context and managed to distribute your products despite this situation. And I will now we have 15 minutes left, and I want to talk with you about what is the future, the perspective, the post-COVID perspectives. Was COVID an accelerator for digital culture, digital innovation in the culture and creative industries? And I have a question for you, Leslie. We know that sadly South Africa has been badly hit by the COVID pandemic. How did you manage to manage the situation with your tech hub to pursue your projects, and how did you also manage to reinvent yourself and the model of the Chimologong Tech Hub because of this, because of the lockdown, because of the sanitary situation? What was your experience?
Sure. So where Chimologong is quite fortunate is that we are already a digital innovation precinct and hub. So our team already had the baseline digital literacy in place. About 2 weeks before our President Cyril Ramaphosa made an announcement to go into lockdown, we moved our team home, remote, and we started a series of design sprints to really make sure that all our operations can move online. I think we're also very fortunate in terms of the support of our partners, and from coming up with new ideas to being able to renegotiate timelines of delivery. So I think for the context of this conversation, it's very important to mention that about 2.5 years ago, we launched our digital content hub in partnership with AFD as well, that financed it, and IFAS, who's our technical partner, who also made the linkages to INA. So I think we're quite a close-knit family on this webinar at the moment. A few key opportunities came up for us. I think, from our Animation Academy, it was quite clear that the interns were able to work productively with high quality at home. But through several brainstorms with IFAS, Institute of France, we also saw the opportunity to commission work to animators. In a similar way, in the Fakugezi Festival, that's our digital arts festival, which usually takes over the neighborhood every October. It's the first one we did virtually, and we were able to commission work to digital artists across Africa. But we've also seen quite significant interest across the continent to come on board. In a similar way, Digital Lab Africa, our Pan-African incubation program, is already virtual. So the downside is that it's difficult to get our winners to France for their residencies, which is part of the value on the program. So that is the one thing that is quite difficult. But COVID gave us the opportunity to validate that our work is relevant and that we are on the right track. In terms of the opportunities beyond COVID, we are now focusing on getting a number of our programs accredited, both within South Africa and internationally. Because again, COVID has proven to us this interest in Africa, and especially when we saw from the animation jam, game jam, several activities we did with IFAS. So we're going to expand that. Our work is grounded in South Africa, but now we're far more focused on Pan-Africa now that we have the validation of our work across the continent, and we have partnerships in place for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leslie.
How have you managed to reinvent your solutions and your strategies given the COVID crisis? What kind of trends have you been seeing recently, and what trends do you think that there will be in the future? Obviously, we cannot go backwards. Digital technology is now an integral part of the solutions.
I think that the crisis has brought out new trends and has accelerated certain trends that were already ongoing, particularly in audiovisual sector. The main innovations are content access, so how we access culture and knowledge. I think, for example, the lockdown and COVID crisis last year meant that there was an acceleration of the launch of SVO Madeline, which gave access to the archives of the Lina project. We were talking about this with the university as well. Access to knowledge has seen the acceleration of blended learning and digital learning programs, and INA has been able to transform its audiovisual and digital knowledge offering more quickly in order to tackle this crisis. And in any case, these audiovisual changes we saw in recent months that they also impacted our jobs, our skills. We had to adapt to a difficult context, and we required skills that we didn't necessarily have initially. So in conclusion, I would say that these new skills, these new uses and ways of consuming content have accelerated, particularly with our work in South Africa with Teacher and Dem. This has helped us to enrich new ways of working in order to adapt to the crisis. Thank you very much, Delphine. I'm going to hand over to Francois now. This era of COVID, we've seen that we've seen a huge acceleration with this pandemic. You'll only have 2 minutes to respond to this, but we can see that computers are starting to replace in-person learning, or do we need to keep this notion of in-person physical learning, and that digital needs to be there as a support and in complementarity? It's not easy to reply to that in 2 minutes, but I think that some of the answer is that clearly digital is an opportunity to share knowledge, but it can only support other teaching tools. Digital by itself, computers, mobiles, will not work. We clearly need interaction. We need in-person learning, face-to-face, even in virtual classes. We need to be alongside our peers, alongside teachers. We cannot just have digital for e-learning. Obviously, the crisis was a huge accelerator. It's brought a lot of people on board. It helped them understand the need to have this complementarity between digital and in-person learning. But we are positioned differently. The crisis accelerated do-it-yourself learning. People saying, I need to learn. I can't necessarily go to a school. I can't necessarily have traditional learning. I need to write. I need to produce work. So I need to produce resources online, but also in person. And this is what we've been trying to do with the company, the media company in Nigeria that we were talking about. We try to push people into their mobile application in order to identify in-person classes that are close to them in Nigeria alongside the virtual classes. And Sud Employeur supports them through that. So there is a complementarity there in order to best support creators and entrepreneurs in the cultural sector.
I will ask you a last question, Elijah, if you can answer in 2 minutes. For you, can you say that the impact of the COVID-19 has been a deterrent, or can you say that it was an opportunity and you are already in the post-COVID-19 and your startup is going to continue and you are transforming this challenge into an opportunity?
Absolutely. I think it was such a great opportunity for the market to get accelerated into digital. I think it would have been a lot slower had COVID not happened, unfortunate as it sounds. I think it gave people also a chance to sit back and just get exposure and discover new talent that otherwise was impossible to discover given the busy schedules that everyone had. I think the one thing that we saw is consumption of content across the board skyrocketed. And that, I think, will move into the future and presents a big opportunity for Feza and other players.
Thank you, Elijah. It's very interesting to see how the response of African tech to the COVID-19 was a response of pragmatism, but also, I will switch to French, I'm sorry.
This was a pragmatic response, an optimistic response, but also a concrete response coming from the ground itself, from civil society. And partnership is at the heart of these strategies. We saw this right throughout this afternoon. We saw this with the DFIs, with funders. We saw this with investors. We just saw this with local authorities, biodiversity stakeholders, and we've seen it in the cultural and creative industries. And we know that startups are at the heart of this revolution. But we do need the support of big institutions like INA, like the Tech Hub, Chimolong, Africa Creative, the French Agency for Development, and also Africa2020 season. And we're going to go back to Ngone Fall as a General Commissioner of the season after everything that you've heard today. As an expert, with your experience of this season, have you seen the young people and tech-savvy people use digital technologies in order to get through this crisis, and the industry has been accelerating? What are the next steps for Africa of the future? I think there is a sound problem in Gwini. Sorry, I had muted my microphone. I was saying that I will be seeking to answer your question very briefly whilst also playing devil's advocate. As I said, nobody saw COVID coming. The Africa 2020 season needed me to be here in person, but I've been working from home since the 16th of March 2020, and I can't do it anymore. So when I hear journalists talking about Zoom fatigue, I don't think I have eyes anymore. I just have holes in my face. This season was meant to promote mobility and encounters. We were meant to build stuff together, be able to hug one another. But we're not able to do that. I'm very tired from all of that. Digital is a tool. That's what I've learned when I started my career. At the start of the 90s, all of this did not exist, and even students did not have their own laptops. So I'm an analog kind of woman. I've seen things move forward. This is a great tool, but it needs to be a tool alongside others. Nothing can replace human encounters. I know that in this project we've also worked a lot with Chimolong, with the Digital Lab Africa. We have a lot of digital arts projects, video games, animation, in all sectors. And these projects were also possible thanks to the AFD and also the Africa 2020 season team. But I hope that the world of the future will find the right balance between human encounters, which for me are still vital, and the artists and creators, all of these thinkers and doers in the world of digital will help produce quality production, but that require in-person encounters as well. I would love to have come to Marseille to be with you. I'm not going to have a 7 hours train ride, especially as the borders are closed anyway. Zoom, people have offered Zoom drinks at the start of lockdown. I refused. For me, I'm counting on young people to provide solutions where tech is vital for education and healthcare, for distribution systems as well. I think that it is vital, but we cannot just leave people with tools. These tools were created by people, and sometimes people need to meet up, and that does us good. And I hope, Samir, that I will see you before the end of this real season in Paris or Marseille or in Lyon. I hope so, yes, and I would hope to see all of you, Leslie, Elijah, Ngone, Francois, and of course Delphine. I would love to see you here in Marseille for the next edition of Emerging Valley in Provence in person. It would be delighting. I would be delighted to see you here as soon as this pandemic is over. Thank you very much, Ngone, for your resilience. Thank you, Elijah, for your inspiration. Thank you for everything that you're doing with Feza and for your commitment to this Africa Creative project. Thank you for the resilience that you've had. Leslie, I know that South Africa has been really struggling with COVID, but you're still here, you're still innovating, and the proof is that you're here to talk about it today. Thank you very much, Francois, for the partnership that you have had with Ouazzara and bringing these two shores together. And you're also part of the social business camp, and we're delighted to see you being accelerated through this program. And thank you, Delphine, for your testimony, for your daring to bring INA into this innovative territory. In some sense, you embody Europe together, Europe and Africa of the future, and the reinvention of the relationship between these two continents. We're coming to the end of this plenary session now. We're now going to welcome Lionel Zinzou, who is former minister in Benin, who is going to give us the closing keynote speech for this Africa 2020 season session at Emerging Valley. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you soon.
Ouais.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Lionel Zinzou. Thank you very much for being here with us. You're at the you're managing partner of Southbridge, and you're involved in the 2020 Africa 2020 season. I know that you have a very busy schedule, but you are the one giving the closing keynote to finish off this day of the 7th of April. Today you have 10 minutes, Mr. Zinzou, to inspire us on a topic. We've been talking about resilience, and resilience has been the key theme of today. But to finish off this Africa 2020 season, how are the creative industries and creative and cultural industries in Africa going to be the lever in supporting post-pandemic, post-COVID-19 growth? These are going to be new drivers of growth. Over to you, Mr. Lionel Zinzou. Thank you so much. I'm really honoured. I do not pretend to be able to conclude debates that have been so rich, so well organised as well. Congratulations for that. And incredibly expert as well. So I'm going to share with you two considerations. One, which goes back to my past as an economist and my financial practice, and one that is more focused on my emotions and to tell you what I'm observing on the ground in Africa with creators, with artists, which seem incredibly rich. This is the metaphor of development here. This is incredible to see Africa with its young people, its women. The first consideration is going to be as an economist. I'm humbly president of the consultative council for Africa 2020. I'm very honoured to be consulted in this, and I think that this is a very important event. Nguni, once again, we've heard her speak about this with her vision, co-creation and co-production that she has achieved is exceptional. It's very Pan-African. And for once, we've created something together across these big continents, and it's something that we can be very proud of. And this is the first example of this. As an economist, talking about creative and cultural industries almost seems paradoxical. There's art, which is first and foremost a capacity of creation or artistic talent. It's know-how, tradition. And how can that be an industry? It's an industry more in the English sense of the word, economic activity, industrious activity, rather than its industrial sense. But in reality, this term is very good, because what I've seen through this season is that we want to express the cross-sector nature across all economic sectors. Culture feeds into all economic activities, all human activities. If we look at my friend Tidiane Dem, who's talking about entertainment and business models, or Fatoumata, where she's creating economic value. There's a whole series of creative activities that have a business model. But it goes beyond simple creation for a public. It's going far beyond entertainment, a musical event. It's going beyond dance, going beyond visual artists. In reality, it's something that generates a lot of employment and a lot of jobs, because it feeds into other activities. That's very important for fashion. And once again, it's highly contemporary, but also traditional. I'm struck. I did not dress wearing wax today. I'm dressed in traditional clothing, but sometimes I dress in wax clothing. Wax is extraordinary as it's a tradition. This is a tradition that is shared. A lot of the motifs and patterns that you see will come from the Tunisian culture through Dutch colonization even, and it's become a part of African culture, and it's incredibly popular, and the meaning behind the patterns is something that people know. You don't have the same palm tree to say that you're happy or unhappy at a wedding, and sometimes they smile when they see young people wearing symbols that they don't necessarily understand, because it's very popular, it's very creative. Creativity has been around for 150 years of patterns. And this feeds into a very large textile industry with hundreds of thousands of jobs. The same thing is true as a cross-sector operation for tourism. The creation and entertainment, artistic creation, is important when meeting communities, when going towards people. We don't just want seaside tourism, we want a cultural encounter with the strong emotions that generates, the acquisition of knowledge that you can have through that. Once again, countries that have been hit strongly by COVID, tourism can represent a huge proportion of their economic activity. If we look at the macroeconomic statistics for Les Seychelles, for instance, they're losing between 10% and 15% of their GDP. But once tourism is back, we'll need this culture that feeds into it. And you can see this across all of the different sectors. There's art for art's sake, but then there's art for numerous different economic activities that carry it, that shape it. And that in itself is very important. We have talked a lot about digital technologies, and that's legitimate because this is one of the themes of this conference. But this multiplies the media that we can use. There's streaming. There's been a revolution of access to digital technologies. And today, this is supporting business models, but there are very varied business models here, and that's one of their strengths. I regret in my government experience public policy. I think that we can make efforts, and perhaps, funnily enough, this pandemic has underlined the vulnerability of artists, particularly for the 2020 season. They were often unable to travel, unable to produce, because the word production is very important. It's just as important for visual artistic creation or choreographic creation, musical creation, as it is in industry. So we've seen that production was sometimes stopped or called into question, temporarily stopped, or completely lost, radically so. So perhaps the public authorities will now be more sensitive to the economic impacts of the creative industries. In any case, there are public policies in place, and we need more. We need the season and your meetings to be a way of lobbying for better support, and also philanthropic models as well. We created a foundation for contemporary art and culture in Benin, which can have between 500,000 and 1 million participants depending on the year, for the exhibitions, master classes with big photographers, choreographic events. With a huge audience this size, businesses are starting to understand that in Africa, they're starting to become sponsors of this. They're starting to invest in this. And this is something that needs to develop in businesses. This is a way for businesses to talk to their employees and their clients. showing their respect for culture and their support for their culture with private business models. There are a lot that are competing in this sector. We are impacting audiences that we can more easily make profitable when we get into the millions of listeners and potential clients. If there's a commercial business model, but there's not just this commercial model, there's the philanthropic model, there's a sponsorship model, which is not quite the same thing, and public models. And all these models need to be developed together. And this goes from startups becoming a unicorn. We saw this in the digital field. Nigeria was often at the heart of these examples. I listened to the French ambassador in Nigeria with significant producers and co-producers for the Africa2020 season. All of these varied business models need to be developed because these are industries that feed into a lot of different jobs. For a very long time, I have supported the fact that we need to defend this alliance, if that's the right word, this alloy of the creative industries, because it supports a lot of different activities that create a lot of different jobs. I think that Africa is returning to growth soon. That's going to be stronger in Africa than in other continents because we have been less impacted by the consequences of the pandemic. And I think you said something that's not intuitive, and you're right. What's going to relaunch the African economic activity? People won't necessarily mention creative industries, but these are completely cross-sector, and they're going to be at the heart of the economic relaunch. And there is a real high demand for content, and all audiences and all ages are asking for this. And this moves me on to my second consideration, which is more emotional rather than macroeconomic. We really felt when listening to my friend and Angelique Kidjo from the same country as me, who has an incredible role in our continent, and I'm glad that she has found her niche, and this is great news for the musical economy. Emotionally, I'm very struck by the latent demand that is still expressed by huge crowds, this latent demand from our populations. And I think that this is also cross-cutting. It's all ages, all generations. You can see a concierge in Paris, La Conciergerie he's called, and he's a Ghanaian artist. We have young creators. We're the youngest continent. The median age in Benin is 17.5 years old. So we have extraordinary resources in our young people. We also have intergenerational resources. And a theme that I'm fascinated by is the restitution of objects that were taken during colonization wars. Is this the older people doing this? No. I think in my generation, perhaps there was a resignation. Who's going to take these works back? Oh, it's the young people. Look on social media, for instance. This is a straight line between 2 points. And what I'm struck with by the Wita Museum that we created was to see contemporary works alongside old works, guided by their grandchildren that explain them and who give them a discourse, a narrative of the world. They're they find themselves before very abstract works, but their 5-year-old grandson is able to look at an abstract painting and see animals, a landscape, everyday objects, a tractor. This is something that 5-year-old children often see in Africa. And they're able to see that in front of a painting, and they're able to tell their identity. And they tell that to their parents, and that's because they came once with school, and then they bring back their older brothers and sisters, their parents. And culture in our world is incredibly popular, and women play a very important role in this. I was delighted to see lots of women in this panel, in startups, cultural, audiovisual discussion as well, because the role of women in creation is unrivaled, and they are. I think that we have a lot of difficulties finding this in other contents, particularly in Europe. And once again, this is about a cross-sector approach, very important in culture. Children, young people, women are fully involved in creation and in audiences and consumption. I'm struck. If you look at hairstyles, you can see this through Jekare's work, one of the biggest museums in the world. Photographs of these incredibly sophisticated hairstyles, but the meaning is always with women, and at the same time it's distributed to all societies. This cross-sector, extraordinary cross-sector approach through generations, this switch and exchange between people, which seem to be very important dimensions. As the General Commissioner said, this is going to stay throughout 2021 and this unusual season.
The the last thing that I would like to say is that culture is a very important factor for making things move forwards. It's a very important factor of GDP, for peoples, for human development, because this is what makes countries stand out from one another. How can we classify culture? How can we classify creativity? So it doesn't matter if you are the first or the last country in terms of culture and creativity. Each country's production is just as important as the next one's. I'd say that culture is an essential part of this. I was very struck by the letter written by Olga Gelungden, and I was very much pleased to have been able to meet her when she talked about culture as a metaphor. When you have nothing left, you have culture and you have freedom. And this is part of something that totalitarianism tries to quash. And despite everything, creation and creativity has always managed to survive totalitarianism. And this is something which we should really take away today, that culture, where you cannot really classify culture in terms of one culture is superior to another. For me personally, I would say that culture is the metaphor of freedom and our development, because our development is still in its junior years. That is why this, for me, is an extremely important consideration. Why do we say that Africa is the continent of the future? Well, startups have shown us this. They've shown us that Africa is the continent of tomorrow, with all of the examples of the success stories that they have been able to bring to the table. you could even say that Africa is 15 years ahead of other continents. I think that it's important to mention that aspect. Well, why is Africa 15 years ahead of others? Well, it could be because of the uses of its people, the uses of its youth, of its children who are getting on board with new technologies and are using them to help them with their daily lives. This is teaching us a lot about the application that technologies can have on people's lives today. In terms of technology, we are far ahead of other people and other continents in a way you could say. And this type of mentality comes from heritage. This is something that we are actually the next people to get on board with the new developments, but we managed to make most of them and lead the way. Africa, some people say, is even the land of promise. As a macroeconomist, as I used to be, is that, well, macroeconomy really covers all sectors. It tries to support and look at every angle of the economy and every type of sector. How can we look at the straight line from one point to another? And this is essential. Tradition and the future are men and women. They are the old generations and the younger generations. Thank you so much, Mr. Lionel Zinsou. Very inspiring speech there. This has brought to an end this amazing day of discussions and exchanges and debates about the African continent. Thank you so much, Mr. President, excuse me, thank you so much. It was a real honor to have you bring to an end this day. You've given us many beautiful images to characterize everything that we have discussed today. Thank you so much and see you soon. Thank you and have a good day tomorrow. We have come to the end of the first day of Emerging Valley. As you have seen, it's been extremely packed. We have had many people listening in today, but tomorrow, don't forget, we will have an even more packed day. So don't forget to sign up to it. We will have Elizabeth Moreno with us tomorrow, and we will have many different highlights about resilience, incubators, the SIBC program, and the pitches as well. There will also be an e-health and female entrepreneurship highlight. On top of that, in the afternoon, we will have sessions dedicated to CCIs, and we will be talking to the Euro-Mediterranean, Med in Africa, Expertise France, and the many different partnerships that we will be looking at as well, thanks to the many different stakeholders that are in the Africa 2020 season. To bring the session to a close tomorrow, we will have Gilles Abimé from the European Commission. We'll have representatives from Microsoft as well, who will be able to tell us their thoughts on things. And on top of that, we will have Eva Seoyo and Omar Cisse, who are two of the biggest players in African economy. The last thing I wanted to say this evening is that thanks to a partnership with Trace, who was one of the panelists today, we will have a musical evening, Marseille, Afrique, Provence, tomorrow. This will be after the digital dialogue at 7:30 to bring a beautiful end to this conference. It will be a magical concert, I'm sure. So don't quit the platform too soon after the end of the debates. If you want, you can stay and listen into the concert. There will be many people exchanging and discussing on the platforms, in the chats, on the website. I see that we have many people who have already signed up to the sessions tomorrow. So thank you very much for participating in today. Thank you for listening in. We will see you tomorrow morning from 8:45 for the second day of Emerging Valley. Thank you very much and good evening.